Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Practical Founders Podcast, where every week we hear an amazing story from a serious founder who built a valuable software company and did it without big funding. I'm your host, Greg Head, and this week my guest is Mike Kovarik, the founder and former CEO of Attribytes, a company he grew, built, and sold in just over 5 years to 5 million ARR, and he sold it for a strategic value back in 2020. I knew Mike from the Phoenix ecosystem, and he was doing it the practical founder way before I was talking about it, and before that was cool. And he showed us all that you don't need to raise VC funding to change an industry, build a great company, and have a life-changing exit. Mike shares his story of how he built Attribytes with his team and what happened after the exit and how he's now back on the train with another software company. It's a great interview with Mike Kovarik. And we're live with Mike Kovarik, the former CEO, but always founder of Attribytes, a company he grew, built, and sold with his team. And I've known Mike for many years here in Phoenix. I'm no longer in Phoenix. Welcome to the Practical Founders Podcast, Mike.
Thanks, Greg. This is awesome, man. I really appreciate you inviting me to be on the show. You're like a little legend and a rock star in our community. So I'm pumped to be a part of this. Thank you.
Well, that's very nice of you. I ran around in Phoenix for 23 years and helped grow 2 big software companies. I'm pretty well known, have a lot of friends there. And we used to cross paths when you were starting Attribytes and you were on that startup trail and doing this weird thing as, you were doing it a little differently and then showing up at let's say the funding pitch events, and I would offer a little coaching there. You were a different kind of guy. You were in this unsexy vertical market, of food distribution and the rest. Mm-hmm. And you weren't doing it the way everybody else, played that crazy VC funding game. You raised a little funding, but you were a practical founder before practical founders were cool.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to be cool. And maybe it's because I didn't know any better, or maybe I didn't have
that's one way to do it.
The thoughts of, raising 100 million. It was more of, hey, how do I get myself to the next round? How do I get myself to hire the people that we needed without getting into like a major dilution on the cap table? And some of those things is like, I didn't even know until like after we were raising money for the first time. What does dilution mean? And, how exactly are we going to come up with a valuation? Because I think our first one was considered management's opinion is, what the company was worth.
Yes, right. All that stuff here. So you raised a little funding, but to the punchline here, you grew this to a sizable SaaS business and sold it in 2020, I guess the big COVID year there, to another company in your space. Let's just start, Mike. What was and is Attribytes, which is spelled BYTES, like attributes with the fun word at the end here.
Yeah.
What is and was Attribytes?
Yeah. The most amazing company ever, of course,
Yeah.
But attributes and gigabytes smashed together. It's how you create attribytes. So I'm a data nerd and was a data nerd at US Foods for 10 years. And then one of my mentors got a job at Shamrock Foods, which is local here to my hometown in Chandler, Arizona. Yeah. So I wasn't having to get on a flight and fly to Chicago for days every week. Mm-hmm. When I got to Shamrock, I felt like I was going back in time about 10 years, working on old legacy Oracle BI tools and really kind of didn't have the same product information guidance and governance that the US Foods had. I had a team of 30 people at US Foods and then a team of a few people at Shamrock. So
And what were those kind of companies in the world here? So we've got international listers too. Were those food distributors where our food shows up before it gets to restaurants and grocery stores? Or what exactly is going on back there?
Yeah, absolutely. So food service distribution is really the big guys that are distributing groceries to the restaurants, schools, hospitals, universities, basically anybody that's too big to buy from a Costco or a grocery store gets food delivered to them. So that was really the primary audience, the primary prospect and client of Attribytes, or these big broadline food service distributors.
I know those billion-dollar companies that we don't see, they're behind the scenes and
Yeah.
so forth.
Yeah. US Foods at the time was, I don't know, 22, 25 billion, somewhere in there.
Ugh.
Shamrock in that 5-7 billion range. So big national player at US Foods, and then Shamrock being a big regional player. So at Shamrock, I had a lot of thoughts and feelings of what I could do to help catch up or leapfrog US Foods in many ways. And unfortunately, the guys that were running the IT department weren't excited about my ideas, and basically told me to go play in my own sandbox. And
Yeah.
they've thought about those things before. And I was like, "What? So you thought about winning and just decided you didn't want to? I don't know." So I got some courage and looked at the employee handbook and saw that it was okay. They're focused on entrepreneurs and promoted that within.
Oh,
And
good. Yeah.
so I was able to start building Attribytes on my own time and my own dime. Kind of
Mhm.
basically after work, I'd go to a developer's house and we'd create a technical scope document, start to wireframe out what the system would look like, and then long story short, we're able to actually launch the platform in 2015. We became Inc. 500, number 210 fastest growing company in the
Wow.
US, I think in 2018, number 210. And then we sold it in
Dang.
2020.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so that was a 5-year journey. That wasn't like, an epic 10-year or 15-year journey, right?
Yeah, no, I worked on it while I still had my day job for, I don't know, 6 to 8 months.
I see.
And then as we were socializing that around, I ended up getting pulled into a conference room at Shamrock, and they said, "Hey, what do you want to do? You want to build the software company, or do you want to work here? We need you to make a decision. We really appreciate what you're doing for the business here. We really hope you stay, but we're going to change some policies here, and we want you to
Ah,
commit one way or another." And so I was like, "Okay, I'll go talk to my wife, and I'll get back to you." And they're like, "Well, really need a decision right now." And I'm
oh,
like, "Oh, all right, well." And I was like, "Shit, all right, I'm out. I'm gonna, I believe in it. Like, do I go pack up my desk and leave?" And they're like, "Well, we're afraid you're gonna say that. So we'd like you to stay and finish one of these big projects that you're on." So, this was midsummer, and I think I stayed through September. And luckily, I was able to talk them into doing a pilot with me after I was no longer an employee. And
yeah.
after a successful pilot, we proved that the application could work and provide value for both distributors and suppliers. We're able to help monetize their transactional data, help create a new stream of income for Shamrock, and moving forward with other distributors. And so we're actually able to sign a contract with them and move forward. And they ended up being my first customer.
And so what exactly was it? I remember it as being a directory of all the products that show up at the distributors with images and the correct text. So all these systems that move back and forth could align with the right data, right?
Yeah.
And was that a version of it, if I remember correctly, or?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one of those things, Greg, as you remember, as we are pitching it, we pitched two different solutions in the one company. And it's fairly rare for the startup to have like two big products right out of the gates. It's normally like, hey, you
But
pick
wait, there's
one.
more.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
there's
Well,
more.
we did
Yeah.
have but wait, there's more, for sure. So one of the things that we saw is food service distributors were not monetizing a latent asset that they had, which was their transactional sales data. Grocery companies, other companies,
Mhm.
retail have been doing that for a long time. They would
Yeah. Mhm.
sum up transactional data and they'd sell that to third parties, so suppliers and other people could buy that data. Food service distributors they weren't doing that. So that was one of the first products that we came out with, is a way for food service distributors to monetize their transactional data through our business intelligence tool. And we could license that out to their supplier partners. Same brands that you'd see in a grocery store, a Tyson, a Sara Lee, Pilgrim's Pride,
Mhm.
those types of brands would be able to license that data, log into our platform, understand lost sales, how much share they had, how much products we're selling in geography. So from a Phoenix perspective, how much we're going to Phoenix versus Tucson versus Scottsdale versus Flagstaff.
Mhm.
So then
Mhm.
they could better allocate their resources, both the supplier and the distributor, to go win in the market now that they were we're working off the same source of the truth. And then the other nerdy stuff that we were doing is that product data piece, where we also help them improve the product data and the images and the nutritionals and the allergens, all the information around the individual products that they sell within the e-commerce system. Most food service distributors want to have an Amazon-like e-commerce platform, but they didn't have access to the content to do so. So we helped them crowdsource that data. And then as we improved the data quality, that actually improved the insights and analytics and helped sell more products. So ended up being a win-win-win for everybody. The end user restaurant had a better experience because they had more contact, more searchability within the .com system. And then the food service distributor obviously selling more of the products that they have higher margin on. And then the suppliers giving insight into what their products look like within the distributor system and then where they're sold.
So those are things that we take for granted. I mean, in the software business, when it was packaged software in the 90s, we used to get data from the distributors about which retailers bought this and what did we sell and all that kind of thing. And Amazon, of course, has all the data about who's buying and and they have a lot of tools about improving the content, about the information for each product, the images, the data, and so forth. But you were in deep into the food service industry, distribution and retail, realizing none of that was really available yet. And you decided to be the corporate refugee to go off and do it yourself here. Did you know you were an entrepreneur headed towards this crazy, solve this industry problem? Or, how did you perceive yourself?
Yeah, I mean, guy? That was always the dream. I always dreamed of freedom. I always dreamed of not having to drive from Chandler to Camelback, for 45 minutes in a day and be able to build the own business. Tried multiple things before this, built some different companies. So I always had that entrepreneurial spirit, but was never ready to leave the day job to go jump into one of those things. And so as we're building Attribytes, it was, this could be the one, this could be the thing that, hey, it has my passions, it has my background, I'm able to tap into my network. So from a success standpoint, a lot of things were in my favor to help make that successful right out of the gates. And I think when I was...
It's a classic story of an industry expert, right? Somebody on the VC on the outside is like, how do you know you have this problem? Well, I was the guy with the problem, right? And, and I tried to solve it 3 times and nobody would do anything about it. So, right, I'm right there. You were, let's say, a vertical expert. You weren't a sales and marketing SaaS, modern software entrepreneur yet. And you weren't a technical person. You were the industry expert guy, right?
I was and still am just the data nerd that, to your point.
And a data nerd, right? So you were, deep inside it.
I was like, hey, I'd like to do this. I even actually went to some of the different software companies that we were working with at the time, the US Foods and Shamrock, and said, hey, I have this idea. I can build this. Really? And I'd love to partner with you because you actually have, a dev team. You have the resources to bring this to life. And went through that process. And at the end of the day, the CEO of that company was like, hey, we'll give you 10% of what this looks like. And I'm like, what? I think that's what you pay your salespeople. So
yeah, that's right.
So obviously that didn't work. And thank goodness it didn't.
Well, I know you have young kids. You're not an old guy yet, right? You've built and sold this company and you're, still on. We both have a little more gray in our beards than we did when we first met 10 years ago.
But a lot more.
Yeah. But did you have kids then, in starting this game or not yet?
Yeah, no, I had kids. Man, I'll get emotional too, where when Shamrock pulled me into that room and said, hey, we need to have this conversation. And, I see the head of HR, I see my boss and, a couple other people in that room, I'm a little nervous because right at that time, my wife, Amber, was actually at the doctor. We just had our second little girl, Jade, and she was about a month or 2 old as I was going into that meeting. So as I came out of that meeting, kind of excited, kind of terrified at the same time. I call Amber and I'm like, so funny thing happened today. I got pulled into this conference room and got told, that I needed to make a decision on, stay with Shamrock or go build my business. And she's like, well, can we talk about that later? I'm like, well, I told him that I'm going to go build a business. And her immediate reaction was, go get that job back. like,
I was waiting for the punchline there, right?
yeah. She's like, you need to go get that
Taking her
job
back.
back. Jade's crying in the background. She's
Gotta
like,
go.
gotta go. You get the job back. And, thank God she called me back about 5 minutes later because I was super bumming after that call. And it was like, hey, honey, I love you. We can do this. I'm proud of you. I support you. We got this.
Oh, isn't it nice? Yeah.
And then I was like, okay. Yeah.
Well, it's also a common story that vertical market SaaS entrepreneurs, right? By the time they're deep enough into a market and at enough level to see the problem and try to solve it, and they know they can't, they're usually starting in their 30s and have young kids. So they've got this young company and young kids, the family at the same time. It doesn't always happen that way, but it's pretty common. Why is it that this happens, that you got two startup adventures going at the same time? And, it's usually about that time you realize there's a problem to be solved and I don't want to be a corporate slave.
Yeah. And then I was maybe rare that I liked my corporate job. I just really frustrated that you didn't have the freedom. When you're working in those corporate environments, they want your butt in the seat at 7 a.m. or whatever that time is. And then they're frustrated if you leave before 4 or 5. Even if you're crushing it and you're hitting your numbers, they just have this thing that they want to see you in that chair working as hard as you can. And I was like, hey, I can do this job from anywhere. And it's, I should be able to do it from anywhere. And I think that's a big part of the culture that we brought into Attribytes. So one of the things that I was passionate about is we were always just a virtual company and we just wanted the best people from wherever. It didn't matter what state, what city you worked in, whether you worked out of your bedroom or you worked out of, a little co-working space like I did there in downtown Chandler.
Yeah, the Gangplank, one of the first real serious co-working spaces with a little, revolutionary religion to it about the different ways to do things.
Yeah. We were a bunch of pirates.
Yeah.
And that was fun because I met some amazing people there. And people that were trying to build businesses. So, you're able to see some people that's like, okay, they're probably never actually going to get their business off the ground, but hey, they're in there trying. And then some other people that were a year or two ahead of us. So Sean and Hiring Solved and those guys were like, hey, we want to be like them. They're building out their team, they're hitting revenue numbers, they look like they're winning. It's like, hey, how do we build that as well? How do we build a company? How do we actually scale a company? How do we create a pitch deck? How do we create, all these different processes that you need to as you're building a business? So it's cool to have somebody right there in the building that had kind of gone through it. And as I had some questions, I could just, tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, how'd you do this? How'd you?
Well, you say your former employee was your first customer and presumably you had a network and were able to sell a few more customers. Did you fund this yourself for a while? I know you raised some funding, or did you have to play that, I got an idea, I got some people that I want to hire, I need to go raise some money game?
So I bootstrapped almost $500,000. So
meaning you invested personally.
Yeah. Without taking a salary for a year and a half too. So I was very blessed.
That's another way to, you said bootstrap, but like literally you wrote checks, out of the business while you had 2 young kids and you went from a stable corporate job to not.
Yeah. I drained my bank accounts. All of them.
Yeah. And so not everybody's ready to do that. Not everybody can do that. Why were you so confident or so able to do that, right? You got this crazy idea. Did you know that you had people who wanted to buy this, that if I can build it, I've got a business and we just need to connect the dots, hurry up? Why did you do that?
Yeah. So at the time that Shamrock said yes, and we were doing the pilot, very soon after, I flew out to Reinhardt, which was one of the other top 10 food service distributors, and was able to get an audience with the CEO and some of the other heads of departments. And they didn't say yes right in that first meeting, but it felt like they were going to say yes by the next meeting. And so at that point in time, I was like, hey, you don't have the order yet, but we want you to come back in another month and show this to some other people. And if that goes well, then, we'd like to do something with you as well. So at that point in time, I'm like, uh-oh, I better hire some people. And so that's where I've had the confidence of spending more of my own money to say,
Okay,
okay,
get
I
orders
need to bring
first,
some
right?
people
Yeah.
in. Yep. Yep. We had the Shamrock one going and that was successful. And then right after that, another big customer was coming along. So I felt, okay, now it's time to invest in a full-time employee to help. And I think by the time we got through the Shamrock pilot, then that's when we brought on somebody else. But the expenses were still higher than, that first initial revenue check coming in from Shamrock.
Right. And this is a big data platform. So this is the era of modern SaaS cloud. There was AWS for data and so forth, but so you could get started without, putting a data center, racks in a data center together.
Yeah.
But there was still some expense to get started. This also sounds like one of those challenges that, are entrepreneurial opportunities where you experience this problem.
Yeah.
And then you went to these other distributors that say, well, I experienced this over here, so I'm building this. Do you have this problem? Or did you just know they have the problem? You didn't call 100 distributors and say, interview
No,
them for their problem. You
no.
knew what the problem
I mean,
was.
I assumed most of them have the problem. I mean, when I was working at US Foods, it was really just like my blinders were there was really only two food service distributors. There was Cisco
Oh,
and
okay.
there was US
Yeah.
Foods. And like I didn't
Yeah.
know like there was all these other distributors out there. And then
Yeah.
when I went to Shamrock, then that's really when my eyes opened up. Is like, oh wow, there's like the two gorillas, and then there's everybody else and these regional guys. And so understanding what problem Shamrock had, and then understanding that Reinhardt had a similar problem, like, hey, all the rest of these smaller guys have had, definitely have this problem as well. And so then it was more of, hey, how do we get in front of them? And I think I was a breath of fresh air going into those meetings with those big distributors where I wasn't a consultant or a technologist that said, hey, I think I can solve your problems. What are your problems? And I'll solve them.
Yeah.
I was able to
Yeah.
go in there as like, hey, this is what my solution does. This is the problem that I believe, you have. This is how we've solved it for others. And then ask them what they're doing about it. And usually the answer is it's on our list of things to do, but we don't have the resources to do it. Because food service distributors, let's face it, they work on really small margins. I mean, they're delivering boxes and they get little pieces of that, the delivering of the boxes.
Yeah.
So small margin companies, they don't have a lot of additional dollars to invest in technology and people to do all of these things. So when I was able to come to them with a solution that says, hey, and I don't know, you probably can't afford to just clean up your product data on your own, but what if I could show you a way that you could monetize that data, and then that monetization of that data could pay for the cleanup?
Yes.
And so then that's when they're like, oh, so I get better product data and I get more money? Like, yes.
So that was part of the proposition, which is, they don't have any money. You helped fund this through your product. It made money for them enough to fund the data cleansing technology.
Yeah. I figured it'd be a lot easier to say yes to me if they didn't actually have to, create the budget for it.
Right.
So if we could create an additional revenue stream, and that revenue stream could be used to clean up your product data, how awesome does that sound?
You were a sales guy now, right? You were the chief sales. I mean, you could walk in and confidently talk about all their stuff, as an expert, I guess, in their problems and the solution and so forth. Were you just like the problem solver relationship sales guy, or did you have to learn to sell? And I presume you were the main sales guy for a long time.
Yeah, no, I was the main sales guy. I think I've always been selling, Greg. I think, if you're married, you've always been selling. I mean,
there we go.
I sold pizza
Even
cards.
in corporate America, in order to get things done, you got to sell.
Yeah. So I never wanted sales necessarily to be my career.
Right.
But I was more on the buyer side. I was like, it's more fun to be the buyer and the negotiator than the salesperson. So that was most of my career. But, even in college, part of making additional money is I was, bartender, and then I was selling pizza cards and pest control door to door. So,
there you go.
I was out, going to be able to take rejection and figure out how I could get people to say yes. And so I think
Yeah.
being in the distributor room, having the confidence of, hey, I know the network. A lot of those people worked for US Foods and maybe moved on to other distributors.
Uh,
And then, a lot of it was just showing what we could do and not trying to sell them on something. So I felt
right.
like, hey, I could do that.
So, did you grow steadily? Like you built the product, got a few customers, and then you started inching this up, and every quarter, a few more customers, a few more features, that kind of thing? Or did it start to inch up and you started the march?
Yeah. So, I mean, we were really lumpy.
Oh, I see.
Shamrock and Reinhardt were two really big deals. So those were over $100,000 deals. So we're out of the gates. We start off super fast, and lots of revenue from those two customers. And then the other products that we had on the data side, if you bought that a la carte, that was more of a $2,500 to $10,000 ARR type of
Mm,
product.
oh, yeah.
So we'd have annual deals and monthly deals. And so, I feel like it was mostly, on the straight uptick, but
In hindsight,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But there was definitely times where I was like, oh shoot, I think we sold one deal this month, and then the next month maybe we'd sell 10. And
Oh, wow.
so it was definitely not a straight line of consistent sales. I think on the enterprise sales side, since some of these were 6 to 9 month deals, we may have a bunch of these enterprise deals all land at the similar
Oh.
time.
Did you have difficulties with a big customer in this complicated software that you had to onboard and ingest data and connect up and do things like that? You had an onboarding professional services or integration
Yeah,
phase?
yeah. I mean, we just really blessed, had an amazing team. So as far as the integration goes, our data guys were able to handle that no problem. Onboarding,
Hmm.
we picked industry rock stars. So and people that kind of sat in that same chair that I used to sit in a food service distributor. We plucked some of those people from industry. So they knew how to, work the tool and onboard somebody, really quickly. Because a lot of times it was technology that they wished they had, so they were able to geek out with it, love it, and then train other people on how it all worked.
And that energy probably helped them get over whatever the internal resistance to change in politics or
Yeah,
something, right?
yeah,
Somebody saying, "This is awesome. I know exactly where you sit, and
yeah,
boy, your life's going to be better next week," and
yeah,
all of that. So,
yeah. The hard part was, since we were moving so fast, customers at that size, they definitely want specific customized
yeah,
features and things like
yeah.
that. So that was the hard balance of, okay, you'll have that in 2 weeks, in a month, when exactly are those new things going to be ready, or when are they actually going to be able to use it? I mean, that was always the struggle of who's screaming the loudest, and where do we need to allocate those resources to make those customers happy.
How did it feel in the middle of it? I mean, you were always behind on features and behind on cash and right, got deals going and you're a little tiny company selling to big company. Did you just have the confidence that this is a major problem and we got the answer to this and we were inspired by it? I know you had a lot of energy around it at the time, or was it just kind of a brutal firefight, or what did it feel like to you?
Oh man, feelings, I think they're numb, to what those
Yeah,
were, but it was absolutely, had the confidence and the belief in the team of what we're delivering was needed. And
yeah,
nobody else was doing it. So we
yeah.
knew that if we got to the right person at the distributor, they would see the value in this. And there was really
Mm,
no reason for them to not do it, unless it's just like, hey, we're working on too many other projects right now. We can't take this on. Because that,
capacity.
yeah,
Yeah.
nobody was saying, hey, we like our bad data and we don't want to make more money. So, so I wasn't getting that.
Yeah.
But I think, definitely the emotional roller coaster of, okay, where's that next hire going to come from? And then how are we going to afford to pay them?
Yeah.
It was definitely a struggle. I think I only raised money enough to give me, 9 to 12 months of runway. So I feel like I was always refreshing the pitch deck and always trying to figure out, okay, what is that next capital raise going to look like? and where are we going to get the money from?
So let's talk about that because you were on kind of a practical track. You weren't taking the bait to go big VC funding, raise $10 million and promise the world and so forth. You were kind of a practical guy. You were not, running around waving your hands that saying this is going to be a unicorn and so forth. And I don't know if people would believe you anyway about the food service industry and this data problem
Yeah.
that's there. And you also weren't, I'm going to go sell a customer and wait for the cash to come in before I hire somebody. You started, passing the hat and raising money around Phoenix. I remember those days.
Yeah.
What was your approach there in that kind of practical zone of funding?
Yeah. And that was the first time I've ever tried to go raise capital.
I'm sure.
Um,
Hmm.
so after the bootstrap piece and basically getting it to where I actually had to borrow a little bit of money right before we raised some capital because we were going to run out. And I went to some people and I think I borrowed like $50,000 from one gentleman and another 50,000 from another person just to like have some breathing room before we were able to raise some capital. What actually happened is there was an industry guy that found out what we were doing with Shamrock and that a couple guys left US Foods and Shamrock to go build this company. And he actually reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, I'd like to invest in your company." And I'm like, "What?"
Then you looked at your bank account and you said, "Let's talk."
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I did that. And that was one of the first times that he had invested in a company as well. So it was kind of like, blind leading the blind on exactly what this looked like. He was really excited about what we were doing and wanted to be a part of it. And we were excited about what we were doing, but not necessarily knowing what we were doing.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
we ended up structuring it, I think, really fairly for the investor to where we did the first round where we raised, I think it was $600,000. And we did it in 3 tranches. So $200,000 at first. And then as we hit some milestones, we got the other 200,000. And as we hit some more milestones, then we hit that last 200,000.
And at different valuations along the way,
Yep.
or
Different
okay,
valuations
good for
along the
you.
way,
Yeah.
kind of all blended out to what we were
Yeah.
looking for.
So when folks come to me and say, "I just need a little angel round," I'm not opposed to, I'm not opposed to VC either, but
Yeah.
it's just a whole big set of things that you're probably not aware of what you're getting into. But
Yeah.
little angel round, they say, well, the best place to go is people in your industry that know the problem, that see the result, who want to help you, right? If
Yeah.
you're selling to dentists, go to a rich dentist and
Yeah.
right. And they know
Absolutely.
what this is. An institutional investor that doesn't know anything about the dental office, it's not going to understand the acute problems that they have, and they have many.
Yeah.
Like, so you started with an angel investor who knew your problem.
Yep. And got it. He wasn't able to necessarily buy our software or use our software, but at least
Yeah.
understood enough of the problem and understood enough of
Yeah.
who we were and who we were targeting and the traction that we've already received to say, "Hey, I want to be a part of what you guys are building."
Did that give you a little, whatever, confidence and credibility that somebody who wasn't on your team saw what you were doing and said, that looks promising for this industry, and you're onto something?
Absolutely.
Hmm.
I was also a little taken back at first of like, "Hey, is this person going to be better funded than we are? Are they trying to
Yeah.
understand what we're doing so they can go do it?"
Right.
So, a little hesitation in there, but then,
Hmm.
after meeting with him a few times and getting to know him and them getting to know me and our company and what we're all about, and him being really serious about being able to do that, because I think from the beginning it was like, "Hey, I'm really into this, but we got to do something within a couple months." So, like, how bad do you want to be a part of this? Because I got to figure something out right now. I'm in the midst of trying to go raise some money from some of the local angel investors, so I either need to focus on that or work with you to make this happen. But I don't know if I have the bandwidth to do both right out of the gates.
Yeah,
Um,
it's time consuming too. So you must have measured that against going to go sell another deal,
yeah,
right? You got to keep this thing going. Did you do the part of the Phoenix scene for almost 25 years? Did you do that? All the angel groups and the angel
I
investors and the
did.
networking and the
Yeah,
coffees and the meetings at the Henry and all that stuff.
every chance I got, man. I was like, "Hey, somebody said go dance." I got up on the
Okay.
stage, and here we go.
Yeah.
And I got a lot of head scratching of, hey, wow, it's really impressive with the traction and the brands that you have, but I don't know if I fully understand what you do.
Yeah, it's a deep problem in an industry that we don't understand very well.
Yeah,
This supply chain game way back there in the
yeah.
food business.
But yeah, I'd go down
Uh,
to Tucson, and I'd be
oh yeah, Desert
Grand
Angels, yeah,
Canyon,
yeah,
and then
ATIF,
yeah,
ATI,
and then what is it? The another group in there as well. Can't remember off the top of my tongue, but
yeah. So did you raise money at those? You do this pitch to a bunch of angels and at the dinner events and all that kind of stuff. Did you raise money, get some checks from those people, or did
so
they? Yeah.
we could probably have a whole nother show on that one. So I did get a
What
term
would you
sheet.
title that show, Mike?
Shit
Because
show, is that fair?
yeah, okay, like a waste of time. Yeah,
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was a waste of time because anytime that you got to pitch and anytime that you got to be in front of sophisticated investors to answer the questions, I think it hardened the pitch and I think it made
yeah,
me
make
better.
it
So I
better.
wouldn't say it was a
Yeah.
waste of time, but it didn't amount to a check.
Okay.
But I did get a term sheet. And then as we were getting into the, okay, how do we, now that we have this term sheet and now we're looking to close this, as we were getting time to, okay, now they're going to fund this, they asked me to reduce my valuation so we could get the money. And I'm like, wait a minute, I have a term sheet and now you want me to reduce it so we can ensure we get all of the funding. And it was like, well, yeah, and then we're going to get some from this group, and then we got to go get it from all the other groups, and this is going to take a while to go get all the money. And I'm like, our business is growing. If anything, the term sheet should go the other way now. Like
Yeah.
our valuation is actually higher than when we signed this, and we've signed on more and more big deals. And so we were going through that cluster, and just right at the time, Todd Belfer, we actually invited Todd from Canal Partners to a GS1 conference where we had a little speaking part. And
Hmm.
since he has the operator background, we asked, Todd, it'd be cool to have your perspective from an operator investor come up and speak about product data and how e-commerce and restaurants and how they're using these things.
Oh, right.
And so Canal Partners had already turned us down and say, hey, we're not going to invest in you, Attribytes. And so that's where we focused on the angels and local. Right after that conference, Todd said, hey, where are you at with that angel group? And I'm like, well, we got a term sheet. We're looking to close it. He's like, what is it going to take for you to like rip that up and just go with us? Because then he was able to experience firsthand how much the industry was craving for what we were bringing
Responding. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the network that we had built. So
And so was Todd investing for Canal Partners, which was like an organized, multiple angels together,
yeah.
former software founder, James Armstrong of JDA Software and Todd of when
Yeah.
an entrepreneur got together,
Yeah.
probably David Paul
Yeah.
in there as well.
Yeah. I mean,
The famous David
they
Paul.
were like the VC of the Valley at the time. It was like,
Yeah,
hey, if
yeah.
you had a really good program and you were doing well, Canal Partners was the VC that you wanted to raise money from.
Yeah, and they weren't like a big VC Silicon Valley
No.
style. With the companies I was with, we went to Silicon Valley and
Right.
raised big money. And this was a local, probably more practical approach. How much did you raise? You didn't raise 5 or 10 million, or what did you
No,
raise?
it was I think it was like 1.7 million, somewhere right in there.
Okay, well, that's not small, but so you sold a piece of your company there, and
Yeah.
you had traction along the way, and so you were convinced that you couldn't let's let's say slow down your hiring and let revenues catch up to fund the business here. Maybe it was a speed thing, or maybe it was just the financial mechanics there.
Yeah. I mean, really for us, it was we were bringing on clients at a rate that we needed more people to support them.
Okay,
And
there you go.
so
Yeah,
we definitely could have throttled sales way back and said, hey, we could probably maybe do away with not raise as much.
yeah,
Um, but when we were looking at it, we were looking for more of like a 1.3, 1.2 in there.
yeah.
And they wanted to do closer to 2.5. And then we settled on like the
Of
1.7.
course,
Yeah.
there we go. Yeah, right. How much of your time as the CEO and chief sales officer and relationship guy and chief hiring person, how much of your time did you spend, say, that year running around, having those coffees and doing the angel pitch events and getting through the mechanics of raising a couple million?
Yeah. I mean, it was it was the third or fourth job, it was
Yeah.
one of the multiple hats you're wearing. So I don't know if I
Was
was
that a
working.
third of your time that year to go raise something
Yeah,
like that?
probably 20-30% of the time.
Okay. Yeah.
Focus on raising, having conversations, going out, driving around, working on the deck, doing all things
Yeah.
related to that, tuning the financial model for sure.
Yeah. And so, how are your wife and kids doing at this time where you're draining the bank account? We probably don't see Mike very often. Were you able to stay sane with this, with the family? And,
Uh, I
you know,
think I've always been a little crazy, so I think sanity
okay.
levels are probably similar. The nice thing was my girls were too young at that age where they didn't really notice that I
Yes.
was
Right.
gone a lot.
Hmm.
That went into one of the decisions of why I ended up selling the company in
Okay.
2020 as well. At that point in time, my girls were, in that, let's see here, Tatum would have been coming up on 6 and Jade, on like 4. So at that point in time, I'm like, hey, I'd like to
Daddy,
be
where are you going? Yeah.
home,
Hmm.
yeah, more often than not. And so I was like, hey, maybe selling the business wouldn't be so bad.
Well, let's skip forward. You were, building the software, getting customers, making custom features, implementing, doing a little raise along the way. Did it grow in a straight line towards 2020 and accelerate, or did you have any major strategic shifts or crises along the way? This you were the
Yeah.
scrappy industry experts doing this thing.
Yeah. And then we really grew by hiring industry salespeople and having them
Oh,
be
with the relationships.
industry enterprise salespeople. So basically, we knew we would grow by each industry enterprise sales
Uh,
leader. They could probably bring $300,000 to $400,000 of revenue a year. And
right.
we'd probably have to pay them somewhere between $100,000 and $150,000 a year to go get that revenue. And
Well, those are the days,
those are
back before salaries went up
yeah,
and, Phoenix was cheaper,
yeah,
back then
for
and
sure.
or wherever they were. And you probably offered them a little lifestyle benefit. You could work from anywhere.
Yeah,
You could be the kings. This is a cool new thing for
yeah,
a
yeah.
slow moving industry.
Of course. And we really promoted our culture and the
Mm,
people and said, hey, this has got to be fun. We're going to do the right thing. We're in an industry that we love, working with people that we love. So we're really particular on those individuals that we hired that wanted to fit and would be a part of that culture.
yeah, there you go.
But there wasn't a ton of those types of individuals out there either that had the Rolodex that could go help us get in front of these other distributors. So I think, coming into 2019, 2020, we were increasing the number of products that we were able to sell within distribution.
Mm,
And at that time, we had 9 out of the top 10 food service distributors on our platform. So we knew that, hey, there was still a lot of runway, still a lot of TAM out there for us to get.
mm,
But for us to go be $100 million company, we would probably have to start breaking into some other industries. So we started to look at retail and the Targets of the world and some of those players. And that's when Syndigo, I think, basically had enough of us. We were dominating food service, and then as soon as they said, "Oh no, they're going to get into retail as well," we probably need to put a stop to what those guys are doing and buy them now.
So the end of 2019, and I know you sold it the October of 2020 officially. So it was that year you're working on this
Yeah.
thing. But how big was your company, team, and revenues, customers?
Yeah. So before we sold, we were approaching that 5 million ARR mark. And
Yeah.
I think we had about 50, 60 people right in
Oh,
there as
wow.
well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So pretty good sized team.
And were you thinking? I mean, at that point, you could raise a bigger VC round, right, and go this game.
Yeah.
How come you didn't do that?
It was a hard decision at the time that I was weighing the term sheet, the offer to buy from
Oh.
Syndigo. I was also looking at acquiring 2 companies.
Mm.
And I had a term sheet to raise. I think it was like 30 million.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Well,
So
you were almost there. Look
yeah,
at you.
but to go make those acquisitions and take that capital, I was signing myself up for at least another 5 years.
Yeah, probably 10 years.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
all
To
in.
to then potentially get to the same spot that an exit right there would be.
Let's explain that to people, because it wasn't obvious in the day back then when, everybody, you just go get VC funding, and we were wondering why Mike is raising in smaller amounts and, being practical about this, because you had a fast grower. You could have raised more and so forth. But explain that simple math to people here about raising practically as you did and
Yeah.
compared to a VC round.
Yeah. I mean, I built a little spreadsheet. It didn't have to be anything fancy. And at that spreadsheet, I was able to see, what my revenue was, what the valuation was, and then what that exit would look like, and then what that exit monies
You're
would look
part
like.
of the exit,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And what that would look like, after taxes, and seeing what that dollar amount was, and then kind of just saying,
Mhm.
okay, if we invested that into the market or whatever, typically at what rate of return would you get just with that money, and kind of
Mhm.
extrapolate that over 5 or 10 years. And then on that same spreadsheet, say, okay, here's where our valuation is. Here's where we're at ARR. If we raised 30 million, what would that do for how would we be diluted? What percentages basically of the company would I have or other people have after that raise? And then at what ARR rate do we think we could be in 5 years? And at what valuation do you think that would be? And at what percentage do I own? So then if we sold at that point in time, what would the dollar amount be? And it was actually pretty close to the
So
exit.
that's the story about the bigger pie. Would you rather have a smaller slice of a bigger pie, right? That ends up being bigger. But you looked at the pies and said, if I sell it early, did you have a co-founder? You were the main?
No, it was the main. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I didn't have another person that had a big chunk. I had over 50% of the company at the time of exit.
Yeah. And so you looked at those two pie charts. What would it be? And what is my slice of it? And they were about the same. So you could raise all this at the risk of 5 years in the markets and do all this kind of stuff and literally end up with the same end result.
With potentially the same. Yeah.
Potentially.
Yeah. No, that
potentially higher
yeah,
too,
yeah,
but
yeah. And that
potentially not.
6th, 7th, 8th year after, raising the money, like the numbers would be much bigger, but then also going like, hey, I'm not trying to have like a plane. So, like if I could have an exit and I could have a lake house and a place in Flagstaff and my kids' kids are good, like what,
Yeah.
what else, what else do I need,
Well, that's another phenomenon in the practical founder world that didn't exist. Is you get this software company to 5 million ARR and you sell it for reasonable multiples. In 2020, the midpoint was probably 10 times back then. So, half of that is quite interesting to almost everybody. And I laugh. That's a number that VCs say that, well, that's nothing. We can't do anything with that. But that makes you, somebody in that situation, somebody like you, worth more than 99% of all VCs.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough.
Yeah.
So isn't that funny?
Yeah. So it was a blessing. And at that point in time, it's like, hey, I wouldn't trade it for the world. We got to have that accomplishment. You got to wave that flag. And then part of the sale, I think, Greg, we talked about it a little bit, is part of the allure to selling to Syndigo was, hey, they wanted to go public in the next year or so. So, hey, sell to us, don't raise the capital. You can,
so big, but you don't have to carry the whole thing.
Yeah. And we can go do some acquisitions together. You can learn off of our dime. And then, we'll go public in the next couple of years and you'll have another bite of the apple.
Yeah.
So
Syndigo, based in Chicago, and I think they were private equity backed at the time. Is that right?
Correct. Still are.
So that's another adventure. They came out and they give you, can we say what the valuation was or what multiple of revenues, or get in the ballpark?
Yeah, almost 10.
Exit
almost 10 times on our side.
So for the total value, but you did it in multiple tranches, meaning you're still a part owner. Yeah.
Oh, I actually got all cash out. So,
okay, great.
Yeah. So no earnout, 100% cash out. And then I decided to take some of the capital after the closing and actually invested it back into Syndigo.
Okay.
So
you were at about 5 million revenues. Can you say what the multiple was?
So almost 10.
Almost 10. There we go. Congratulations. So isn't that interesting how you played that? And you were there at Syndigo being an executive leader.
Yeah.
For a year, but you didn't have an earnout. It wasn't
No,
Was it part of your contract to stay a few years, or did
no,
you just think it
nothing.
was leading Attribytes in this new entity?
And I wanted to do it. I wanted to help them go public. I thought that would be an exciting
Yeah,
adventure.
cool.
I wanted to keep and retain as many talented people on my team as possible. I thought it'd be
Uh-huh.
fun to do acquisitions. I thought it'd be fun to help lead that organization to the next level. And all the things that I thought were going to be amazing didn't quite pan out the way that I thought it would happen.
So how can we nicely say this? You're still friendly with the Syndigo people. Some of
Yeah,
your team is still there.
yeah,
You're part owner of the company and
yeah.
so forth. Has it gone public?
No, not public yet.
Okay, so not gone public,
Yeah,
but like you were a big corporate guy, you left to be entrepreneur guy, then you end up in private equity backed big company,
yeah.
acquiring companies and piling them together and so forth. Did you like that new adventure? Maybe fast moving, bigger
I
company?
mean, I did. I liked the adventure. Really, the problem was the market changed in
Oh,
2021. So we went from dry powder to like let's acquire companies and just growth at all costs. Doesn't matter expenses. To PE companies saying, "Hey, time out. We're
profit.
no longer gonna do acquisitions, and we're
Mm,
gonna focus on being an organic growth company."
mm.
So the things that I signed
So
up to
path to
do,
profitability, just like a normal,
yeah,
funded software company.
yeah.
Yeah.
So then the things that, I thought we'd be able to do and have a lot of fun with acquisitions, that all kind of paused. And then it was really focusing on reducing costs and top line organic growth. So then it
Hmm.
was, hey, what is the least amount of people that we can run your old software program with? And I give them a number, and I think they took 10% of that number and said
Yeah,
we'll do that. So that was tough to
that's
to
fun.
go from winning and breaking sales goals every month to then going to feeling like you're losing, and your friends and really the family that you built this company with hating their jobs and not wanting to be there, and leaving to go find other jobs. That was tough. That was really tough.
Yeah. How long did you stay with Syndigo after this,
About
after
a
your acquisition?
year and a half. So I was like, "Hey, I'm still
Yeah.
climbing this mountain," and my guys are like, "Hey, we just climbed the mountain. We crushed it." And I'm like, "No, we're going back up. Like Camelback times two. Let's go."
Yeah.
And
Uh-huh.
I don't think not everybody was up for that next climb either.
No, I get it. I've run into you a few times since then at these pitch events in Phoenix, right? The
Yeah,
fundraising events, and where a lot
yeah,
of people come together, and entrepreneurs and investors and people from out of town and so forth. And like the last time I saw you, you walked in to this meeting, and it's pretty casual in Phoenix,
yeah.
but I think you were wearing shorts and you had a great tan for where you were, and you're like, maybe I'll invest in some of these. And I'm just looking around. You had a big smile on your face.
Yeah.
When did it feel like, I don't know, the relief or the smile came back? Was it after you sold the company and cash hit the bank account, or after you left and decompressed, or
I think so. After I left Syndigo, it was my last day was right before a family vacation, much needed. We went to right from
yeah,
there. We went to Maui with the family, and
yeah,
then very blessed and fortunate to then spend the rest of the summer at the lake. And that
yeah,
was, I think, my first time since I was 13 or something like that. That I didn't have a
yeah,
job.
yeah.
I didn't have any things that I had to do, and that was a weird, incredible feeling. And then I came back
Was
to
that good? I struggle with, without the quest and
that
the
summer was
challenge and something to
amazing.
work on the puzzle.
That summer was amazing because I
Oh,
didn't,
great! Yeah, good for you.
like I was able to just relax and enjoy the boat and enjoy the kids and have an amazing summer. Now, as soon as I got back to Arizona and the kids went to school, then it was like,
Ah,
um,
so
now what? Like I'm back in the desert and my friends are all at work and the kids are at school. So wifey and I couldn't
and
just,
your wife doesn't want you
just
hanging around all day. Yeah.
no. Yeah. So I was like, now what? And then that's where I started then reflecting back of, okay, what do I want to do with the rest of my life here? I'm still a young
Mm.
man, at that point in time, I'm early 40s and
Hmm.
trying to figure out, okay, God gave me some talents, had some successes. Uh, I should probably put those talents to use, and started figuring out what do I really love to do, and
Hmm.
I really love building and
Yeah.
company building. I loved it. So I was like, hey, I want to get back to building. I want to get back to company building. The impact that I could give on people and
Yeah.
families was
Yeah.
special. So I was like,
Yeah.
hey, that really filled my soul and something that, I was passionate about doing. So I was like, hey, how do I go back and do that? But I didn't want to go do it from 0 to 1 again, because that's super hard. I didn't have like another
You
Attribytes
find an
idea.
idea and
Yeah.
validate the idea and get first customers
Yeah.
and get the
Yeah.
flywheel going. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I did the harder thing, was buying a business that was like from like 1.25, like, not, a little over 0, a couple
Yeah.
$100,000 in revenue, a couple hundred clients, but was not growing. And
So you looked around to shop a company. Like you said, I want to
yeah,
go buy a company.
yeah, I
Yeah.
want to go
Okay.
buy companies. Well, and when I started, it was like, I want to go buy big companies. I want to go buy, tens, 20, $100 million company. I had an exit, I can go buy companies,
Yeah.
And then very quickly got grounded as like, well, you don't know how to do that. Nobody's going to fund you to do that. So it's like, well, maybe I can go buy a small company with my own money. And maybe I can find some people that want to go on that adventure with me. And so that's what I did.
And did you look at dozens of, run
I
a
did.
process
Yeah.
and,
I put a
that
whole
kind of thing? Or
spreadsheet
did you
together.
somebody stumble upon it and say, hey, Mike, you want to buy this thing?
No, I mean, I put a whole spreadsheet together. I acted like
Okay.
those guys
An
that
actual
call
spreadsheet. Yeah.
founders, and I started searching the internet, and then realizing that this is a job that I don't want to do, to go out and solicit companies to
Oh,
buy. And
right.
it's like, that's a lot of work. No wonder why those guys get paid good bucks to do that job.
Hmm. Yeah, and there's all founders that have an up and running software company these days in the States, 1 to 2 million or something like that. They know that almost every day on LinkedIn, somebody's knocking on the door saying,
Yeah.
hey, can we invest and buy and,
Yeah.
all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So pretty crowded out there. How
Yeah.
did you acquired and you're
I
running a
did.
new company here? How did that happen?
I did. So through the network, one of the guys on the Startup AZ group, part of the circle of friends and the network out here in Arizona, was a CTO for a company. It was really more of a lifestyle type of business. So
Yeah.
ShopControlller, actually been around for 25 years, desktop installed on-prem solution for auto repair shops. And had a crazy idea of like, hey, I wanted more of like an ERP system for food service. And he said, well, hey, why don't you take a look at kind of our ERP point of sale shop management system we have desktop installed, could help give us, a little bit of a head start opposed to starting from nothing. So I was like,
Was
okay,
that
great.
Jason Saunders?
Yeah, through
Oh,
Jason.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we acquired that company January of last year, and then started reimagining the brand, taking it to the cloud, and taking this old desktop installed software and putting it into more modern framework and rebuilding it, and started scaling that up.
So an old software cloud with customers that aren't yours, wouldn't it be cheaper just to restart and say new customers, new code base anyway,
Yes.
and just go there? What?
Yes.
Okay, just checking.
Yes. It would have been.
Yeah.
Probably would have been.
So you went from 0 to 1 back to 0, right?
Yes,
Yeah, right.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. So I was like, oh, actually, I'm still going 0 to 1, because I'm still
Yeah.
actually am rebuilding a new program and trying to get customers on it. But at the time, it sounded way better to start with
Yeah.
some revenue, and we just, it would be super easy. We'd just rebrand it, put it to the cloud, and everybody would buy it, and away we would go. It sounded like a great plan.
Because that worked so well before.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Where are you now with ShopControlller?
I mean, we're back in the fight.
You have a product.
We
Do you
have a
have customers
product.
and
We
revenue now?
have
Okay.
customers. We have revenue. We actually just came out with our second product, which is
Oh my
really
gosh.
cool.
I hear you do that, Mike.
I do. Maybe I have a little bit of a building problem, but
Yeah.
this was a little bit more of a necessity. So for
Yeah.
those of you that are having that enterprise SaaS type of software sale, it's a longer sale, and actually getting a customer to
Ah,
switch shop management systems or go from nothing to something is, taxing on the onboarding side, and it's not
mhm.
something that these customers necessarily want to do. It's a lot of
Right.
change management, it's a lot of training, it's a lot of hand holding. There's probably
Mhm.
some therapy in there as well.
Mhm.
So one of the things that we learned on the Attribyte side is, if you could have a product that people could use and maybe has a low entry, a low cost, that they don't have to switch from something, that really helps get your foot in the door. So the new product that we came out with was a voice controller. So spending time in auto repair shops, the phone would just ring off the hook. And a lot of times they wouldn't even answer the phone. And then I'm like,
Yeah.
maybe it goes to a voicemail or maybe it just keeps ringing. And we're at this age now where AI is come along quite a bit in its technology. So we thought, wouldn't it be cool if we could just roll out an AI assistant that can answer the phone for an auto repair shop, do some basic question and answering to understand, is it brakes, is it AC, where's the sound coming from, and then just schedule an appointment right there. And so that's what we did with Voice Controller. And we've had a tremendous amount of success. Actually, today is the first day we went live. We signed up a little over 50 beta customers over the last couple of weeks. And this thing has really taken off. So it's exciting. Sometimes you have to go through some of the tough ones to find the easier one.
I know. Right. So you are focused on this auto repair shop market with the, now new innovative products and so forth. Does it feel exciting to be on that front line, interviewing people and figuring out what the problem is that you're not an expert about?
Yeah, it is. It's just fun to learn something new. It's definitely harder, for anybody that says, hey, you can go from one industry to another. It's harder to do that. Just because I don't have the network, I don't have the friends, I didn't experience the problem firsthand. So it's tough to go build solutions in new verticals. And we're learning that, hey, there's some tough competition in that space. There's some well-funded companies in that space. But then we're also still taking that practical founder approach that says, hey, we don't have to be a unicorn grower. We can still grow at, maybe double the revenue in a year, and that's okay. And, sometimes I have to tell myself that that's still okay too. Like, hey, that's still good growth.
I know, we have to remind ourselves, right? To, accelerate. And what's your vision for this? Do you want to run it for 20 years and run it profitably and have a happy family of employees and customers? Or do you want to get it to 5 million and sell it to a strategic for the right deal? Or what do you think you could do?
I mean, the biggest driver is to make positive impact. I mean, I'm all about like, hey, how can we make impact? And then how can I have fun doing this? How can I have fun building the company with individuals that I really like and love doing business with? And I'd like to do this for the rest of my life. I'm like, I don't know if I can just be retired and not have a job or a business. I really like the business side. So I was like, hey, let's just keep building products and keep building companies. And then who knows, maybe one day we'll take it public.
Yeah. Well, that's exciting. And you got a big vision for that. Most actual normal people don't think that the
Are you saying I'm not normal, Greg? What are you trying to say?
This is our advantage. We're just abnormal. That's all it is. We're actually not smarter or better than anybody else or better shape. We're just abnormal. And so we'll do the things that normal people won't do, which is, this is fun to go wake up early and travel to customers and nitty gritty and face hard problems and re-envision and, do. Is that what you're saying is fun, or this isn't like I work 2 days a week and I play golf the second?
No,
what's the fun part for you, Mike?
It is gritty, and it is fun to me.
Yeah,
probably as much as going to the gym is fun for people. Like it's hard.
It's a hard thing, but
sweat, your heart's going and pumped up, and that business, that gym, that workout, that's fun for me. I like that challenge. I like solving tough problems. And I really love working with people and customers to go make an impact and provide value for them. Like I get a lot of joy out of that.
Yeah. This is my sport, if you will. Right? I follow a few sports, but there's a lot of people that sports is a big part of the fun in their life. But this is actually the puzzle. And, the hero's journey, the characters, the teams. And there's really, in the end, nothing better than changing the world with a team that you want to, go through the fire with.
For sure.
And it's very addictive, and it's hard to get off that thing.
Yeah.
So
I wanted to be Joe Montana. So that was my first sport. I that's what I did want to do. And then, then there was Spider-Man. I thought that could be a potential option too. So when neither one of those panned out, then I was like, hey, maybe we'll be business builder, Mike.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. Thanks for sharing your journey, Mike. I knew a few of those things from all the conversations we've had over the years in Phoenix, but to go leave the corporate job and slay the problem and get through all the hoops and
Yeah.
sell it and cash out, with investors there and go on the journey and do it again and keep going. Every time I see you, you got a smile on your face these days. So
Yeah.
that's the name of the game, doing hard things out there.
Yeah.
Mike, what advice do you have most often for practical founders out there who are getting on the field and getting their revenues up here about how to play the game? And, you probably talk to a lot of entrepreneurs and
Yeah.
help out as I do, but like, what's the most common advice or that you would have for practical founders out there?
Yeah. I think the number one advice that really helped me, definitely want to share with your listeners, is go find the network of people that are playing a similar game that you're trying to play. Go
Mm,
find somebody that's a couple years ahead of where you want to be. Maybe a similar type of business would be preferred,
yeah,
and go spend as much time with that individual and those individuals as possible. I mean, they're going to be able to teach you things and help you avoid pitfalls that they've been through, and it'll dramatically change how you look at your business and the time that you spend within your business and some of the things that you need to do to help grow to the size of business that that individual and those individuals are a part of. So I would say that's critical number one. Greg, I remember the first time that I made it to the Greg's list, and I think I shared that with the family and friends. It was like, hey man, I made Greg's list of
yeah.
software
Well, Phoenix
companies.
Software Company,
Yeah,
right? I have a real
yeah,
software company. Yeah.
yeah. So I was like, hey,
Yeah,
I'm going to
powered
work
by
with him.
AI,
Yeah,
actual intelligence. I was curating the list on a big
yeah,
spreadsheet of all the
yeah,
real software companies in town and
yeah,
publishing it on my website, and that
yeah,
turned into a thing.
yeah.
So,
But being able to find somebody
uh,
like a Greg Sorsby, that hey, their
yeah,
business, Campus Logic, enterprise SaaS, kind of smaller TAM. And it's like, hey,
yeah,
how did you get here? What are some of the things? What was that your founder journey? How did you raise money? How
yeah.
did you raise capital? How did you explain your TAM? How did you do things? And I remember every time talking to him, and he was, years ahead of where we were at Attribytes.
Hmm.
But like one of the times he said, well, I spent about 10 to 20% of my time just on recruiting and just on
Yeah.
LinkedIn and following up with individuals. And I was like, oh man, I maybe spend less than 10% of the time.
Hmm.
So that was like a dramatic shift of just one little conversation to say, I need to be spending probably you know X amount more time doing this activity than I'm doing now, because
Yeah.
finding
Greg
good
has helped.
people to scale the
Yeah.
business is probably the most important thing. And I wasn't spending the time doing that. So that's where I like, hey,
Yeah.
that one piece of advice, go find a couple of those individuals that are kind of where you're wanting to be and go learn from them for sure.
Awesome. Well, Greg Scoresby is a friend of mine. He's been on this podcast as well. He grew a big software company up, Campus Logic in Phoenix, and is kind of leading the charge to help B2B SaaS companies go to the next level in Phoenix. And there's a lot going on in Phoenix, as we
Yeah.
see on
Yeah.
gregslist.com/Phoenix there. And your point about having uh, people in your network, that's why I created the Practical Founder peer groups. They wanted to be around other CEOs at their level and others, who are a step ahead and other experts there to have those conversations and pick up those insights within the context of their very own business. So it isn't about VC funded companies or some other industry.
Yeah,
People can find really practical things right where they are, and the problems they're facing this month.
for sure.
Yeah. Well, great. Thanks for sharing your story. Congratulations on your successful journey and the smile on your face and the new challenge at ShopControlller. All the best to you. Thanks for being on the Practical Founders podcast, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. And happy to connect with any of those practical founders that either just need a little bit of therapy or want to figure out how I did it in a little bit more detail. So, Greg, feel free to
Awesome.
pass my
How
name
can
along.
they reach out to you?
You can email me at mike@shopcontroller.com, or you can blow up Greg, and Greg's got my cell phone number.
Yeah. And I'm sure you're on LinkedIn as well.
Yes. Yeah, you can find me there too.
Awesome. Well, I'll put the phone number on the front page of my website for everybody.
There you go.
I
Cool.
appreciate that. That's very nice. And paying it forward for the next generation.
For sure.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Greg.